August 25th, 2014. Will you please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, that was the mayor for the day, Kalina Honcharenko. She did a great job, and she's been spending the day with me today. She's a rising 8th grader at John Witherspoon Middle School, and she's been a delight to have, and thank you for spending the day with me. And you're great at the gavel, too. Did you want to say anything? Okay, or you can go sit down. Okay, we're going to start tonight's meeting with 3 sets of minutes. The minutes of June 23rd, July 14th, and July 21st. Are there any changes or comments on the minutes from council? Mr. Simon?
Yeah, I sent a set of changes to our clerk, Ms. McDermott, earlier today. Just to summarize, they're all in the section on the flood house. They're basically adding individual speakers. So before Mr. Kaiser's comments regarding the demolition costs, I mentioned that Mary Clerman asked about the cost of demolition of the house on that property. And then after his comments, Mary McCluskey spoke in favor of the resolution. Barbara Winitsky spoke in favor of the resolution and said the house should never have been built. Linda Auerbach asked about the plan to build a pocket park on the property. Mr. Kaiser responded that the property slopes down from west to east and that park equipment placed on the western side of the property would be less likely to be damaged. I commented that I was not in favor of placing park equipment anywhere on the lot. And then the only other insertion was after Nira Levid spoke, her husband, Moshe Levid, also spoke in favor, in their defense and in favor of purchasing the house. So all of those would be proposed amendments to the minutes.
Okay. And I had some name spelling recommendations too, or corrections.
Thank you.
And just for everybody who comes and speaks tonight, it helps the clerk if we're going to have public comment after we do the minutes.
But what about a correction of something in the minutes?
We'll get to that in 1 second. But if it helps us have accurate minutes, especially with the names. If when you speak directly into the mic up there and spell your name, especially if you're not a regular commenter. That would be helpful to us. Are there any other corrections or changes from council?
This is really, pardon me, Linda Auerbach, Lytle Street. I recall my remarks, and someone, I believe Mr. West or Mr. Kaiser, had said, "You're our eyes and ears," meaning the public, about the Avalon Bay project. And I had, in the minutes here, it says, Linda Auerbach, Lytle Street, asked Mr. Kaiser if there was a way for him to check on a blue Januzzi van recently parked at the Avalon Bay site that was leaking a large amount of liquid. What I actually said, and I said this in English, was that I was walking up Witherspoon Street to the intersection of Nassau Street, and there was a large Januzzi navy blue truck leaking fluid. Number one, I didn't know that Januzzi was allowed to go up to Nassau Street, to State Highway 27. I thought they were to have gone off to Paul Robeson Street, whatever. So I don't know how this got into the minutes. It seems to be on every single point, other than my name and street and Mr. Kaiser's name. It was neither a van nor was it on the Avalon Bay site. So
we'll double check.
I don't know how that happens. Maybe I don't speak clearly enough. Okay.
Double check the tape.
Thank you. And it's happened on many occasions, by the way, and it gets put out in the press, so I look like even more of a jerk than I am, and I fully accept that I'm a major jerk. So I've gone from being a beast of burden to what I call a burdensome beast. So anyway.
No.
Okay.
You're not a jerk.
Well, it does help to speak directly into the mic, but the press usually doesn't, the press is reporting what they hear usually at the mic, because the minutes come later, but yeah, no, I appreciate your comments, and we'll check the tape on those. Mr. Simon?
How do we handle the minutes if we've got a potential correction like that? Do we
Which
approve
date
them?
was that?
6/23. I can talk.
The
23rd.
The 23rd. All right, can we hold the 23rd then and do the other two?
Absolutely.
Okay. So is there a motion to approve the minutes of July 14th and
So-
July 21st?
So moved.
Second.
Moved
Take
by,
them separately, please.
okay. Is there a second for July 14th? So, second. Okay, so moved by Mr. Liverman and seconded by Ms. Howard. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I have to abstain on the 14th.
Okay.
I wasn't here.
Thank you. Mr. Simon abstains because he wasn't present then. And for the minutes of July 21st, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Kremler and seconded by Mr. Miller. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, the minutes of July 21st passed unanimously. And the minutes of July 23rd will hold till the next meeting. Now we come to comments from the public for items not on the agenda. There were two people who had signed up ahead of time to speak, so we'll start with them. Mr. Driscoll?
Thank you.
Paul Driscoll, and that's Harris Road, and I think you know how to spell my name, but it's Driscoll. And I'm actually reading a letter which has been signed by 18 citizens, and it regards their concerns on the demolition of the hospital site. With regard to the decision of Princeton Council to settle the lawsuit with Avalon Bay and allowing the demolition of the hospital site to proceed, there are questions.
Can you actually back up a little bit? You're like the...
Is this better?
Yeah, maybe lower it a little bit. You're getting some... Yeah, that's probably better.
Sorry. With regard to the decision of Princeton Council to settle the lawsuit with Avalon Bay and allowing the demolition of the hospital site to proceed, there were questions asked that still have not been completely answered. It remains uncertain as to who will be sued and who will pay in the event that someone becomes ill. Is the council's position that the municipality, including its citizens, are held harmless in the event of future litigation involving any adverse effect that may result from demolition and construction of the project? Most compelling is the concern for workers on the site, citizens living nearby, children, teachers, and staff who will be at Community Park School, Henry Pennell Center, and Princeton High School. As the hospital site is in the center of town, many students will be walking past the site on their way to and from local schools. Many of these people lack financial resources and may not understand how to proceed with filing a lawsuit against a national developer. Imagine if something goes wrong, or if in the long term someone develops an illness resulting from possible contamination. Will Avalon Bay defend themselves simply by saying that they complied with the developer's agreement authorized by the municipality? Did anyone consult with the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs Board of Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors to review the specific clauses in the licensing laws as to the ethical responsibility that our engineering staff has regarding their rights to refuse to sign a demolition permit that in their opinion is potentially harmful to the health and safety of the public. In advance of their decision to settle, did the mayor or any council member obtain the summary judgment documents and then actually read them? Did council confer with the LSRP, Licensed Site Remediation Professionals Board, to review the testimony provided by Avalon Bay's environmental expert in their surprising request for summary judgment? Should the validity of their statement that they followed ASTM, American Society of Testing Material Standards, be questioned, given the fact that they did not file an Open Public Records Act with the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection during the Phase 1 analysis, thus failing to ascertain the existence of an incinerator use on site? Has Princeton Council been in contact with the New Jersey Department of Environmental Division of Remediation Management to discuss the plan for soil which is located under the second incinerator room to be moved to another location on site without testing, and the fact that the site of the original incinerator is being ignored altogether? Considering the demolition of the hospital site is the largest in Princeton's history, with unknown levels of contamination, members of council should have weighed carefully each of the aforementioned concerns, strive diligently to obtain additional information, and not have been cajoled into rushing in their effort to do everything that they can to protect the health and safety of all citizens. And this, as you can see, has been signed or submitted by 18 concerned citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cecil, are you able to respond to any of the legal questions in here?
If you're referring specifically to the liability issues, I mean, I can speak in generalities, but I can't give you guarantees.
Okay.
I mean, in general, municipalities have all sorts of immunities from suits, plus this is a private property being developed by private developers. So as I sit here today, I have a hard time conceiving of a scenario where the municipality would be liable, but I can't give you a guarantee.
So I think that's what a lot of the people that signed this letter live close into the site, and they have concerns about what would happen if somebody really got hurt. What would be the process that they would file a lawsuit? A lot of people don't have the means, the financial means, or perhaps the understanding to file a lawsuit. And then is the municipality, including the citizens, responsible? And based on what Ms. Cecil is saying, there's no guarantees on that. And that's why everybody's concerned.
Yeah, I understand this, and as you know, I was not at the meeting last week when the developers agreement was voted on, but I do support the action of the council, and I probably speak for everyone here when I say it was probably one of the most difficult votes anybody has had to take. It's not anything anybody relished doing, and it was the case of a choice where neither one was something that you wanted to do, and as people who have fiduciary responsibility and also the responsibility of if you take a very pure stance then and you go to court and you lose, there's a very real chance that we'd end up in a very unprotected position for our residents. So it's, I think oftentimes we try to do the very best given the situation that we're in and the circumstances that we have to deal with. And, we all try to work to have it be a more perfect situation, but sometimes we're bound by constraints and by timing that aren't of our choice. Ms. Krummeller?
Well, I also want to add that I do think that we ended up in an okay place. I mean, I felt reassured by what our experts told us about the environmental risks, and I thought it was that the solution of putting in new soil everywhere that people were going to come in contact with the soil was good. I'm not saying, I mean, I agree with what Mayor Lempert just said, but I also feel like I don't want to think we should give the impression that there's some big environmental risk out there that we are ignoring, because we did get an expert, we did get, more testing than, we had initially asked for, and I feel like the testing that we're getting is going to be adequate. I mean, I feel pretty confident. I understand some of the neighbors don't, but I think we got, in the end, good protections.
Well, if this were an industrial site, when the soil, if it was contaminated, have to be removed completely off the site rather than being moved somewhere else and within the site and then capped with asphalt. I mean, I don't understand.
Right, but we don't have. But it became pretty obvious that the law. We have no legal right to treat it as an industrial site because
I know that.
So,
but that's the frustration that everybody's feeling right now.
Right. No, and I think everybody up here shares your frustration, and yeah, Ms. Howard.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I also want to go on record, as I was not here last week, as I'd like to start from the position of thanking the members of the community for being so involved in this process that were it not for your involvement, we likely would not have hired an outside expert and we wouldn't be where we are. So, the tension is always, you don't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good, but we are, I would agree with Councilwoman Krummeller's comments, that we're in a much better position than we would have been, and this advocacy actually started back when we were on Borough Council, when Jenny and Joe were serving with me on Borough Council, and hiring our own LSRP to advise our terrific staff, led by Bob, has led to a much better process than where we would have been, and we were unfortunately constrained by state law, and I hear that frustration that hospital sites are treated differently under state law than industrial sites, and shouldn't be, and we're entering a new world where we're probably going to see more hospitals close, and we ought to be talking to our state legislators maybe to reflect that. We're going to see more cases of hospitals being decommissioned, and we're going to face this issue. We've had a boom of building hospitals, now we're going to see hospitals closing, so we won't be the last community to be facing this, but I think the good news, and I know it's hard to see that sometimes, is that there's been incredible community involvement and incredible staff work here to be responsive to that, and we have ended up in a much better place than state law would have allowed us if it hadn't been for that. And so I want to thank you for continuing to push us so that we are doing far more testing than the minimum state law would have required. And that, and I think we can feel good about at least doing that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Kaiser, do you have the details on the Avalon neighborhood meeting? It might be a good time to mention that.
I do. The Avalon neighborhood meeting has been scheduled for next week from Wednesday, which is September 3rd at 6:30 here in this room.
Are we free to ask them any kind of questions like I do to you? Like if somebody gets ill, who's going to pay? Because that has to be a concern for them. They must be aware that they're redeveloping a hospital site. They must know that there are concerns from the citizens as to who's liable.
Yeah,
I'm almost afraid to ask them that question because
they're not likely to answer it. I think you should feel free to ask them any question you want. My understanding is that they will probably have some explanation or presentation on the demolition of the building, and I'm sure that they'll entertain questions at that time.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Auerbach?
I had wanted to address the continued lack of adequate signage for safety's sake on Lytle Street, but I see that you have a working group on, where is it here? On traffic and transportation, council liaison. Would that concern signage on side streets?
Yes.
Okay. One thing, so this is another example, and I'm not really complaining, I'm just pointing this out. And I have a fairly good memory because of music training. The first time I hear something, it like stays with me. But if you refer to the July 14th minutes, and again, this is just focusing on my own remarks. I only feel entitled to speak on my own behalf. Linda Auerbach, Lytle Street, said that there is protection of subcontractors. This was about the wage theft ordinance. By private homeowners. I said no such thing. I said that it was private homeowners who also needed to be registered when they are engaged in a project of remodeling their homes, that they should also be registered with the town, because I have referred numerous cases to Maria, and her name is not spelled Fuega, it is spelled Juega with a J. Many of the complaints I referred to her about wage theft had to do with private millionaire homeowners, some of whom live on Mercer Street Road, bilking guys out of thousands of dollars to remodel basements. So it's not just a matter of landscaping people ripping the public off, or restaurants, but private homeowners. So that was what I actually said, and somehow it ended up as stating that I said there is protection of subcontractors by private homeowners. Anyway, the only other issue I wanted to raise, and I do want to protect Avalon Bay and Yanutzi at all costs, we'd better get the signage on Lytle Street fixed soon. Because if one more car goes speeding down the wrong way because the signage has not been fixed at John Street, so we've got a bent Lytle Street sign, we've got a John Street sign, right next to it is the one-way sign, and then there's a stop sign. You cannot see terribly well that it is a one-way street. So people are wheeling onto Lytle Street, and I've facetiously said we should post a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit on the wrong side of the street and put a stop sign at Witherspoon Street so that when they get to the wrong end of the street, they will at least stop. And I will bet you 2 cents that at some point, some vehicle is going to crash into one of Yanutzi's transport vehicles. And then the town will be liable. So at least protect yourselves from Yanutzi in that respect, or Avalon Bay, if not the public. And I thank you, because I'm sure you've tried to do something about it. But the sign going into Lytle Street is completely whited out, the one that says no parking from here to corner. So even though there's a children at play sign coming from the south, there are invariably trucks or SUVs parked right next to the pedestrian crosswalk because it no longer says no parking from here to corner.
Thank you. We'll make sure those get to the Traffic and Transportation Committee for action.
Because it's quite a few cars in a given week, and they're speeding, and they're not stopping at Witherspoon Street. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on items not on the agenda?
Again. Hi. Thank you. My name's Steve Mariotti. I just moved here. I've lived for 37 years in Greenwich Village on West 12th Street. I still have a home there. And I've always wanted to live in Princeton. And I came April 24th, and I love it. This is an incredible community. I actually came here when I was 23. I'm 61 now, so 38 years ago. And I was a graduate student at Michigan in theoretical economics. And you all here at the university invited me out on a panel, and I came out. I loved it, and I said in one of the classrooms, I said, someday I'll live here. And sure enough, here I am, so I'm really happy. There is one issue that is bothersome to me, and I wrote about it in Huffington Post. I write 3 columns a week in Huffington Post. I'm the most widely read journalist in the world in small business. And every week I'm going to write a story about this great community of entrepreneurs. I hope you'll read my column. But I have written about this on Huffington Post, and recently on the Princeton Packet, which I read every day, as well as US 1 and all the others. But when I was 1957, I was 4 years old, and I was in Ann Arbor, Michigan. My parents were professors, and we went for a bike ride, and I was on the back of my dad's bike, and my father and mother did not wear helmets. And I was watching my mother and talking to her, and we came down around Pontiac Trail where we lived and turned right in front of the Candy Dancer, if any of you ever been to Ann Arbor, great town. And she hit a little piece of cement, not even a brick, a little piece of cement. And I saw it in that fraction of a billionth of a second went into my subconscious and my mind, and I have total recall over it. And you can still, up until 20 years ago, you could still see the blood from her brain injury. And she was unconscious for 45 minutes. We got great medical care. We were literally 180 yards away from the University of Michigan Medical School, great school. And she was in rehab for about 8 months and then began a life of horror, if I may say so myself. I never went to school. I was homeschooled, and my primary assignment was to make sure my mother was okay from this brain injury. 90% of the time she was, and had a brilliant career as a poet, good friends with Sylvia Plath. I have an original bell jar, by the way, if anyone wants to see it. And my father became a very well-known, very famous, actually, engineering professor. So we had great lives overall. But every couple of weeks, she would go into trauma, and we'd have to call the police or hospitalize her. It was really, really terrible. It got worse and worse. And in 1986, when I was 35, she had a grand mal seizure. And they did an operation, and they found the largest brain tumor in the history of Genesee County. Flint, Michigan is where we'd moved. And she spent the next 11 years in a coma. Her teeth rotted, her arms turned around and broke, her leg broke. We spent $376,000 on average in 1986 dollars to keep her alive. I have two closing parts of my talk, and I appreciate so much that you've listened to this. But I love this community almost as much as you do, and I salute you for what you've built. But the two closing parts is I go to the funeral when she finally dies, and I go to my father. I fly in from a youth conference. I'm a at-risk youth educator. I fly in for the funeral, and I go to my dad. I said, my God, I wish we'd let her die 10 years ago. And he looks at me and he goes, I wish you told me that. We never talked about it, which is very common with brain injuries. So I bring to you today this testimony in the hopes that you'll consider really being adamant on bicycle helmet laws here in this great town. My own research has indicated that on campus, within the great Princeton campus, top school in the world in my opinion, 76% of the students don't wear helmets. Then, on my research, and I actually hired a professional to do the statistics of it, approximately 61% of the people on Nassau and the adjoining streets there, Witherspoon, etc., don't wear helmets. And the thing I want to heighten your awareness to is a brain injury is a billionth of a second. I literally have total recall of my mother's brain hitting the little piece of wood and then hitting the edge of the brick and the blood everywhere. But also the statistics that you're getting are not accurate. When someone has a brain injury here in Princeton, they don't go through the local hospital. They're almost always airlifted out to a trauma center, often at University of Pennsylvania or one of the other great medical schools. So the actual statistics aren't accurate in the city, and the police department, which is excellent, we have an excellent police department, but for whatever reason, the data on brain injury that are caused by bicycle accidents without helmets is not something you're going to routinely see. So I wanted to bring to you this community that I love and urge you to act on it and make it very, very difficult for people to drive a bike without a helmet, regardless of their age. In closing, I'd like to say that I would like to help by committing $15,000 to a nonprofit that I would like to start, which would be to help people that are low income get helmets. And perhaps through the fees and the fines, which I hope that you'll, working with the police department and the leaders of the community, that the money that does come in as you enforce this, great prohibition on riding without a helmet. And I've seen nine children under the age of 6 without helmets. I don't get that, but I just don't get that. But I would like to do my part. Maybe part of the fines that you collect can go into a pool to help people that can't afford helmets to help helmets. That's my only criticism of Princeton. I hope we have a great year this year in sports. I'm sure we're going to. And my name's Steve Mariotti, and I'm proud to be part of the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mayor, just one comment on that. Mr. Mariotti, we have a bike rodeo, a wheels rodeo once a year, and we give out helmets, but perhaps we can partner with you next year and increase the outreach. And we do give out helmets, but we don't have unlimited resources, so your offer is really appreciated, and I'm certain there are ways we can find to work with you on more awareness of the, like you, I've seen a lot of people not wearing helmets, and our state laws obviously don't require it for adults, but we can certainly educate people about the advisability of wearing them, and we can do more for people in the community who may not be able to afford them. So I'm sure there are ways we can work together. But in particular, the rodeo that we have at the beginning of every summer might be a nice partnership.
I'd love to write about that. I could get a featured story and having to post about that. I will. I did not know that state laws here. I've never.
I believe is it 13?
17 juveniles, yes.
So, yeah.
Well, I'm going to work on changing the state law, so I hope you'll help me do that. But that should be changed. That's then the issue. I didn't even know that.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on an item not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the comments from the public, and we'll move on to the hearing on the Comcast application for renewal of municipal consent. And this is a continuation of our July 14th public hearing, and we've been having a negotiating team work with Comcast, and I'd like to turn things over to Steve Goodell, who's been representing us on this issue.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm Steve Goodell. I'm your special counsel for cable television issues. As you know, the Comcast application for renewal of municipal consent, higher, louder. Comcast application for renewal of municipal consent was filed earlier this year, and as part of the regulations that the BPU has and the state's Cable Television Act, you are required to hold a public hearing to determine whether or not that application can be granted. As part of the process, we have begun negotiations with Comcast. I know that Mr. Miller is up to date on that. He's the liaison to the negotiating team, and he can spell out exactly where those negotiations are. But part of the process is to hold a public hearing. We began that public hearing in July on the 14th. We asked that that public hearing remain open in case there were additional members of the public who wish to bring any matters to your attention or write in. So this would be that opportunity. It's been publicized and put in the newspaper. So if there's anybody else from the public who wishes to speak, now is the time. And in addition, any documentation that the clerk may have received can be made part of the record. If there's nothing else, then it's time to close the public record, and we can move on and continue negotiations. I know that in my discussions with Mr. Clifton from Comcast, he has no objections to continuing, really continuing negotiating until we both have reached a point at which we're comfortable with the results. And he also said that he can't be here tonight, so he asked that we move forward without him being present tonight.
Okay, thank you. Did you have a report?
I have a report, but I can give the report during the report section of the meeting.
Okay.
But I'd encourage anyone who is here tonight who has any comments about the cable TV service provided by Comcast to speak out. And there may be viewers at home who are watching the meeting at home. And Steve, I wonder if we can make the deadline perhaps a couple of days from now so that anyone is watching the meeting at home and has a comment, that we can accept that comment as well.
I think we can do that, sure. Although what we should have is a stated deadline so that we know that after that point, the public record is closed.
Can we make it the close of business this Friday?
Sure. Yeah, or we could make it 1 week from today. That way, get the weekend in as well.
Okay. And with that, I'd encourage any viewers at home who have any concerns or comments about the service that Comcast has provided, specifically the cable TV service that they provided, to get their comments in to the chair of the negotiating team, Peter Thompson. Peter, do you want to give your email address?
Well, or he could send it to one of us, and
or
we'll
to,
forward it. I mean,
yeah,
they could,
or to
since
me,
we're easy to find on the website.
Send the comments to me. My email address is on the municipal website.
And are we, next Monday, I believe, is Labor Day, so that might not be the best day to have a deadline.
The deadline.
The deadline, all right. So by the end of the day, by 5 p.m. on Labor Day, which is September 1st, 2014, if anybody has additional comments. But I'd like to open the floor up now to anybody here who would like to comment now on Comcast. All right. Seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing, although we will keep open the opportunity for people to submit comments by email for 1 more week. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank the negotiating team and everybody who's been working on this so far, Council President Bernie Miller, Peter Thompson, Chuck Creasy, and Donna Liu. Thank you for representing the town in this. And now we're going to move on to the presentation portion of our agenda, and we have 3 presentations for this evening. And I'd like to start with Ed Trisselli, who's the Director of Princeton Community Housing. We're very proud here in Princeton of our affordable housing program, and Princeton Community Housing is a big piece of that.
Thank you, Mayor, for the introduction, and thank you, members of council, for the opportunity to speak here this evening. Just give me a moment to get the laptop ready. Okay. Can everyone see that presentation on their monitors?
Is it the same one that was emailed to us?
It's just slightly different. There are a couple of very minor modifications. Okay? Again, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. My name is Ed Trisselli, and I'm the Executive Director of Princeton Community Housing. Just a quick introduction. My Board President, Rich Gilman, is in the front row, along with Valerie Haynes, who is the Chairperson of our Public Relations and Advocacy Committee. And there may be other members of my board in the audience, and I recognize their presence here if they are here, and thank them for coming. Understand we have a limited amount of time, so I do want to go through what we have here in terms of a presentation, and if anyone has any questions in the meantime, please feel free to ask those as I go through this. Princeton Community Housing is a nonprofit organization. It was established in 1967, and our mission is to provide, manage, and advocate for affordable housing. In a nutshell, Princeton Community Housing provides opportunities. We really want to give people, no pun intended, a foundation from which to start and down the road to self-improvement and to also giving back to the community. We have currently 466 rental units in town, which constitutes homes for about 1,000 folks, predominantly in 4 communities and also in several neighborhood locations. Some of you, or all of you may know, we did move to Monument Hall late in 2013, and we're very grateful for that opportunity to be next to many of the partners that we work with on a daily basis, and it's a great nexus of services for the public, and again, we're very, very grateful to be there. Thank you for that opportunity. This slide just quickly illustrates the breadth of our organization. We have 18 sponsoring organizations, and they're represented on the screen. We also have 6 on our Board of Trustees at-large members, so we have a pretty good cross-section of the community as a result of our structure. We were asked to illustrate some of our recent accomplishments, so we felt that this was a good example of the way we've been able to collaborate in the past with the municipality to be able to realize more affordable units. And these are 2 examples, and these are what we like to refer to as sort of the neighborhood homes. There are 2 examples here, 5 and 6 Shirley Court and 246 John Street. And we were able to partner with the municipality, in this case it was the former borough, and be able to acquire the homes and also then to renovate them and make them available as rental households. We also provide programming in our communities to not only enrich the life of the resident in our community, but also the greater Princeton community. A couple of examples here are the community garden at Elm Court and Harriet Bryan House, which is on Elm Road, and we've had tremendous support over the last 4 or 5 years in terms of establishing that garden from local vendors and merchants and donors and supporters, and that in turn is, again, no pun intended, but harvesting an awful lot of interaction with the community. We've had an intergenerational gardening program there with the students at the elementary school and the residents there, the senior citizens who live in the communities. We also have, we're compiling a series of life stories with the residents there through Princeton Community Television. Over at Princeton Community Village on Bunn Drive, some of you may be familiar with the Marcy Crimmins Learning Center, where we have the Princeton Young Achievers Program in partnership with the YMCA. And we also are working with Corner House, and they've been very, very helpful in helping some of our folks there to achieve, the greatest potential they can achieve. So just a little bit about what we do in our communities. This slide just gives you, again, a sense of some of the other things that we do to allow people to thrive in our communities, not just survive. And in turn, this kind of assistance or support also gives those folks the opportunity to give back to the community. The lower photograph there is actually from last year, but those are scholarship winners up at Princeton Community Village. And many of those folks there have gone on to college. Some of them are still in the secondary school and the high school here, and they also give back to the community by tutoring other students. So it's a process of not just receiving, but giving back. One of the roles that PCH, or Princeton Community Housing, performs on a municipal basis is we serve as the administrative agent for the affordable rental units in Princeton's affordable housing inventory. We work hand in hand with Christy, who is the municipal housing liaison, to market these units, ensure and enforce affordability controls, and make sure that the units are rented to eligible households. This slide illustrates the Affordable Housing Task Force. I'm not sure how many people are aware of this group's existence, but all the organizations in town that provide affordable housing get together on a periodic basis, and it's in the name of collaboration for shared goals. some of the things that we've done in the past, we had a presentation for the League of Women Voters where we all got together and basically did an advocacy piece on affordable housing and the need for affordable housing, and I'll get to that further on in this presentation, but also just to educate people on how to apply and how to make themselves a best possible status in the application process. We're going to change gears here just a little bit because this gets into explaining what PCH's goals are. Again, from a very general point of view, affordable housing, by the government's definition, and again, a very general definition, is a family should not be spending more than 30% of their income on housing costs. And that everything goes into that category of housing costs. In a rental situation, it includes utilities and renter's insurance if you have something like that. But again, that's the general rule of thumb that the government uses. Now, if we apply that, focus on the right-hand side of the slide for a moment, but if we focus on that piece of information as a starting point, 44% of the renters in Princeton spend more than 30% of their income on housing costs. That's pretty revealing. And that's not just in Princeton, that happens statewide and throughout the country. And there's a lot of data that illustrates that. There's been several articles in many newspapers pointing to that information. On the left-hand side is just a chart that illustrates, again, just the rental units. We have about 786 total rental units in Princeton. And that there are two organizations that provide the majority of that, and then the municipality also provides some. All told, Princeton has 957 affordable units, sales and rentals. And again, this chart illustrates from a graphic point of view what the proportion is of those rentals and sales units as opposed to other categories of housing. The need for affordable housing in this community is tremendous. Despite the strides that this community has made well before I've been here and in the past, and well before COLA was even established, Council on Affordable Housing, I mean, despite all those efforts, there remains a significant need for affordable housing. And this slide illustrates, I think, the breadth of that need. These are the three major, organizations or groups that provide affordable housing or manage affordable housing. And you can see as of May of this year, these were the waiting lists that each of those organizations had. Pretty significant. And there, of course, there is some duplication or overlap because many people provide, not many, but some people apply to multiple housing programs. Each program is somewhat different. Again, sales versus rental. The way the funding of the program varies, the eligibility requirements may be different, so there's some overlap in this, but it's not significant, just from our anecdotal evidence and research. So again, this gets into a little bit of our discussion on PCH's goals. Everybody's aware, I think, of the two properties that have been discussed in the newspapers, and certainly one of the uses for these properties has been affordable housing, or the potential for affordable housing. And again, I think I speak for my organization in that these are opportunities we should seriously look at and evaluate for affordable housing. And I think some of the other members of the Affordable Housing Task Force may also feel the same way, but I cannot speak for them. But again, there's a distinct and significant need for affordable housing in this community, and these would seem to be great potential opportunities. So again, we were asked to talk about our goals. The information I gave to you previously kind of informs, what our goals are as they're listed here. We've been doing advocacy since 1967, and we're going to continue to do that to ensure that there's a balance of housing in this town, which is essential to this community's livelihood and cultural diversity. We're going to continue to work with the task force, the municipality, and the greater Princeton community to provide those additional opportunities. And some of these strategies should definitely include inclusionary zoning with at least a minimum of 20% set aside. We should also look at adaptive reuse in the neighborhood neighborhood infill, and we should be mindful to keep affordable housing, if possible, in areas where there's accessibility to public transit. And also, we're going to continue to exercise sound stewardship in the management of our properties and in the enhancement of programs which support residents and enrich our community. And to sum up, this slide illustrates a couple of the properties that we've been able to work with the university on and the municipality that we do not own, but we help to manage these. But these are neighborhood units, and I think that this is a great example of what we can do with inclusionary zoning. But to sum up, PCH's mission and accomplishments demonstrate our commitment and capacity to work collaboratively with the municipality and the greater community to build and manage affordable units. And these are needed to ensure that balance that we talked about. So we're ready, we stand ready to do that. We're ready to partner, we're ready to assist, help evaluate, whatever the case may be, we stand ready to do that. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. I wanted to see if anybody on council had any questions or comments. Yep, Council President.
Just a quick question, Ed. Next in the presentation, what, if anything, do you need from council to help you achieve your goals?
Well, there are probably many things, but I would say the most important would be the potential for financial support. Many of these properties have development costs, construction costs, soft costs that are associated with the planning and design of a potential project. So I would say, as in the past, as the municipality has been able to consider that type of in-kind or financial support of projects, we would look for the municipality, if possible, to continue that in the future.
Ms. Crummell?
When I took a tour of your, thank you for this presentation and the wonderful job you're doing. When I took a tour, I remember of the Princeton Community Housing, I asked about the turnover, and do you check up on people's income once they become eligible? And is this the case that once people become eligible and enter into the agreement to be in the program, no one checks their income anymore? So their income could rise and they could still be using the affordable housing unit. Is that?
Actually, only one community does that situation exist, and that's Princeton Community Village.
Oh, okay. It's only Princeton Community Village.
And actually, there's a bit of a distinction that I should clarify as well.
Okay.
And I'm going to give you sort of the shorthand version of this. There's a much more technical explanation to it. But at Princeton Community Village, a person or a household can come in at the base rental rate based on their income category. And at some point, if they have an increase in income, they will have a maximum rent that they can pay regardless of what their income is. So we do recertify on an annual basis, or when there's a significant change in income. However, when a person reaches that max of rent, this doesn't really matter what their income is, they are permitted to stay there. That is what the rules allow. We don't have a mechanism to force them out. That wouldn't be right. There's no rule for that.
So so you recertify. In the other 466 rental units, are those people being recertified every year also?
Yes.
Okay, that's
basically the same conditions. Whenever there's a significant change in a life situation, a death or some other type of a situation where there's a significant change, that would necessitate a recertification. But on an annual basis, that's done by mandate.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
My other question was about the waiting list. So from what I've also heard, that people sometimes put their names on multiple waiting lists in different towns. And I was wondering about what percentage of people, like when you go down the list, how many people, is it a pretty high rate of acceptance? Do you see what I'm asking?
Acceptance in other municipalities, or?
No,
okay,
so say we have your number one next on the list. When you call that person, what's the percentage of people on the waiting list versus how many people actually qualify and then move in?
Well, I referred to earlier in my presentation about some of the educational work that we did earlier this year with the League of Women Voters, and we're going to continue with that. Frankly, many people aren't in a position when their name comes up or when they become eligible from a financial background point of view to continue in the application process. We're trying to help people understand that they have to, quote unquote, get their act together. And for some people, that's a real challenge. I'm not making light of that situation in any way, but people also need to have the assistance and the education to know how to go about doing that. So I don't have a specific percentage answer for you, but there are several people in our sort of realm of applications that are unable to continue because their eligibility, or they're not eligible because of their background situation.
Would that be helped by providing additional low income units?
Well, in some cases, possibly. It's not as much of an income issue. Sometimes it is a background issue. Not always, but sometimes that's the case.
What does background mean? I'm sorry.
Background means criminal background.
And maybe the ability to get credit? Is that?
No, it means there's a history of some criminal activity.
And that precludes people from renting?
It does in some cases, because when there's a landlord has eligibility criteria, and that criteria may say if there's a criminal background and the matter is not resolved, that may be a reason for not being eligible. It depends on the landlord. Again, as an administrative agent, we also manage the application process for units that we do not own, and that comes into play in those situations.
Mr. Woodman?
Thank you. Thanks, Ed. You did a great job. Before I arrived on the Township Committee 13 years ago, I was on PCH board, and I had to get off PCH board because I was up here. And I can only say that Princeton Community Housing does an awful great job in supplying housing for many people. The criteria, sometimes I wouldn't say it's tough, but it's fair. But like anything else, we try to place people whenever housing is available. Also, I think that a good note that I think that Jenny mentioned, Councilwoman Krumler mentioned, was low housing. There's all different types of affordable housing. You can have low, you can have moderate, and so forth across the board. And I think in Princeton that low is where we are also off at, and we have to increase that. Right. And the Princeton Housing Authority is one of the agencies that do a great low when it comes to housing. I also think that there is a false hood, or that we believe that there are people that are able to pay large amounts of rent, but when you look at a family and what they're actually bringing in financially, a family of 4, a family of 5, a family of 3, you would be surprised that they're even making it, much less paying rent. It's incredible, and that's why, and all of us up here, we've been big supporters of affordable housing in Princeton, and we want to continue on that vein. When COA produced those numbers that Princeton didn't need anymore, or 0 was the number for Princeton, I mean, I think everyone up here felt the same way, that just couldn't be. Right. You just showed us a list of 1,900 applicants. Out of that 1,900, if there is duplication, you're still left with 1,200, 1,300, 1,400. Those numbers are incredible for housing. We're not talking about something that you can take, something that you don't need, something that's an extra. I mean, we're talking about housing. So I think that I just want to just compliment and say that the organizations that are fighting for affordable housing, I think you guys are all doing a great job. And I think that one of the reasons why I live in Princeton is for the diversity and for the way that we treat our citizens. I think it says a lot. When you have an affordable housing program that's strong, like ours, I think it says a lot about your community and what your beliefs are. So I'm just saying, like your cheerleader, rah, rah, to these agencies, and please, just keep it up.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm sorry. I had one other thing I wanted to mention, which I think is a statistic that may be of interest, and I failed to mention it in the beginning. But out of our units, again, 466, 14% are extremely low income, 42% is very low income, 24% is low income, and 20% is moderate income. So you can see the spread there. That's current households. And the other graph that we had that showed 44% of the folks in Princeton who are renters are paying more than 30%. That just cuts across all income strata, and that's a very telling statistic too.
Mr. LeMaire, one more question.
I've got one thing. I also want to say, in Princeton, we're lucky because you don't only have to rent, you can also purchase, which is something that's unusual in most places. So we do have a purchasing program for affordable housing also. So you can have you may think that you don't make enough, but if you sit and talk to our great Christy Peacock in regard to purchasing, you'll be surprised that you can purchase a home in Princeton at a reasonable amount based on your income. So please, if you're interested in purchasing, let us know that also. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed. I have a couple questions. There was something I didn't understand. We took a tour of Merwick Stanworth this summer, those lovely new units. And do you play any part in managing those?
Yes, we certify the applications for eligibility for affordable housing. We partner with the developer who's developing the property on behalf of the university.
Right. And so at a point, there were some units available. I think they've probably been filled by now. But why, with this long waiting list, was there an issue of getting the word out so that those units became filled? I mean, with a waiting list that's 1,900, you would think that they would have been gone immediately.
Right. Well, we had actually 200 applicants for those units, for 16. There were only 16 units in the first phase.
Right.
So we had 200 applicants. I'm not sure that there was a failure to get the word out or a lack of effort. I think the word did get out. Frankly, a lot of folks didn't apply because they didn't think they were eligible or they would be. And again, that's part of that education process. Christy and I and others, we met with people in small groups and tried to explain exactly what the the application process is like. But I think some folks are not always comfortable that they're going to be eligible.
But so there is a credit issue, is there not? It's more than just a criminal issue that might prevent people from qualifying.
Correct. Depending on the landlord or the property owner, they have their criteria. In this case, it's the developer with Merwick Stanworth. Whatever their criteria is what we have to use to determine that eligibility.
And is that clear? Is it public?
Yes.
I mean, everyone knows. It's not some sort of moving target that people wouldn't know. Like, if you want to live in a certain place, you know that this is, I can come to you and say, what is it I need in terms of what, a credit rating?
Yes, well, it's not really a credit rating, it's a background. We look at the full background analysis. So in other words, just to give a hypothetical, if someone has very minor credit issues for medical-related expenses, that's something we might take into consideration because it was a medical-related issue, and it's of a minor nature. But if there's a pervasive historical record of abusive financial situations, then that tells a different story.
So you do have some flexibility in terms of...
Depends on the criteria established by the landlord, yes.
Okay. And you'll also manage the Avalon Bay?
No. We have not been retained for that at this point. We have not put a proposal in.
Manage those themselves?
Yeah.
But that will add 10% if you have that's a huge increase in our...
Yeah, I think 56 affordable units will result as of the completion of that project.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Did you have any questions, Mr. Simon?
I just want to say thank you for the presentation, and the backlog was really an eye-opening thing to see. I think for the people up here, and I think for the members of the public, and I think if people reflect on you're reflecting the background of people who are selecting into the program, who are trying to get in.
Right.
recognizing that there are people who are selecting themselves out because they believe they won't be eligible, also recognizing that there are people who are not eligible who are also having affordability issues, just trying to get into our community as well.
Right.
It's really quite a challenge that we face in terms of balancing our values and working toward the diversity of the community that people remember from years ago and sort of where we are now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Ms. Howard? And I'll just add my thanks, Ed. Great job. And I'm particularly glad that you used the opportunity to highlight some potential inclusionary opportunities that are coming up that are on our potential docket. So there's been a lot of consternation about the proposed rules from COA and confusion about what we can do in Princeton, but I think it's important to keep our eye on the ball and know that we have some opportunities coming up, and we can really, that we have an opportunity to make real progress here. So I'm glad you highlighted that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
If I could just jump in real quick, because I know from a staff level, we are going to have a couple things coming to the governing body with regards to one of the couple parcels here, because as part of our agreement with PFARs, we're looking towards taking on their property when they leave, and we're going to come forward with a recommendation and a plan as to how we might move forward with evaluating that property for an affordable housing project so that we know whether or not it would work there. And that's going to come before you fairly quickly, so it's kind of a nice segue so we can begin that planning process, because I don't want us to take on a property in 2 years and not have a plan as to what we're going to do with it. We have a lot of time in which to work on that while we're building across the street, so it'll give us an opportunity to study it and see what the feasibility is and so forth.
Do you mean this fall, hopefully, or what do you mean by, even you say fairly soon?
Fairly soon, like, very soon, September.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Thank you. While you're still here, Ms. Butler?
Can I ask a question about that, Bob? Because how, knowing that we would get that parcel, and I understand that affordable housing is an important concern for people in the community, but I am surprised to see both the Franklin lot and the PFARs on the presentation as being designated for affordable housing opportunities, and I'm just wondering what that process is/was that they would be on this presentation when we really haven't had a discussion at the council level about both those properties.
I won't speak for PCH, but I mean, they've been on the staff's radar for quite a while for properties to evaluate for that potential, to do a pro forma, to see what could be placed there should we desire to take it, or maybe you want to put something else there down the line. But eventually, the Franklin Avenue property that we don't own yet will be a municipal asset. So my recommendation to the council is begin to look at what what the possible visions are for that. Maybe affordable housing's not one, but I know that it had been talked about as an affordable housing site for Princeton University when they had an obligation. That's one of the reasons that they acquired that property. But aside from all that, we don't need to make that decision tonight. But the same holds true for the PFARS property, that will become a municipal asset, and I think it behooves us to look at what those opportunities are so that we're not caught in 2 years owning a piece of property with 3 buildings on it, and now what do we do?
That's absolutely, I agree with that 100%. I'm just wondering where the decision was made that that's what would happen without a discussion on council.
Well, no decision's been made. The idea is to get council. In fact, just to elaborate a little more, and I don't want to take up the other discussion's time tonight, but one of the things we're going to suggest is that potentially council put together a task force to look at that, to give you a report on what some options are, what you could consider for Franklin Avenue, what you could consider for the PFARS property. Ultimately, you're going to need to look at it from the 2 firehouses that you're going to have that hopefully will be empty at some point in the next couple years, and when they merge into all one firehouse. So you're going to have a lot of opportunities out there to look at redevelopment potential. And, I'm not going to lie to you, I've had discussion with PCH. They were very good partners with us in the borough in rehabbing units and taking properties and tearing them down and rebuilding them. So I said, well, what do you think? And there have been discussions with the Housing Authority. I know they're very interested in having the Franklin Avenue property redeveloped, whether it's by them, by somebody else, or a combination. So it's not something that we've said, we're going to do, but it certainly is a known potential in the community. And I think the idea that we're going to recommend is let's start exploring what that potential may be.
Well, is it first come, first served?
No, we're going to own it, so it could be first come, no served. I mean, that's ultimately a decision council will make as to what you want to do with it. We don't own it yet, but we will at some point when they're done with, when the university's done with their project, that'll be given to the community. I just think it's good to have a plan.
Well, I think one of the important notes to make about that wait list is that there's a significant percentage of those individuals or families on that wait list are not people who want to live in Princeton. They're people who are living in Princeton right now who can't afford to stay here. Yes. And so it's like those are our residents, current residents on that list, a significant percentage of them. And I think that, if we have these municipal assets, we definitely, I would say that would be one of the top uses on my list of how we should be using those sites for the best use of the community. Given that we have to look at all of our options, but I would say that given that there's I think some interest in exploring that, it seems like the time would be now or soon to put together a group to look. So I would say if you're interested in working on that, let me know and we can try to put together a group in the fall to start looking at those two sites. Yes, Ms. Krummeler?
Well, I was wondering if the Valley Road building had been discussed at all in the terms of affordable housing. I know we don't technically own it, but it is a, we did talk to that one
years ago. I know it had been. It hasn't been recently. Let's just say that. We're looking for property. We at a staff perspective, we looked at properties that we either own or know we're going to own that don't come necessarily with any real restrictions.
I know just because we were approached by the one developer who seemed to have a scheme for creating affordable housing, a possibility, and I think there might be another one that I've heard about with regard to the Valley Road building that, rehabs old buildings, and I wondered if it's worth approaching the school to talk about that. It would take care of our problem.
I didn't want that to be the segue for you.
Lock the doors while we have them in here. Anyway, so I'm sorry it took up so much time, but I thought that it was a nice segue to talk about some of the things that are going to be coming before the council.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, and I think we'll continue this conversation, and thanks for all the important, good work that you do.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And our next presentation this evening is going to be from Steve Cochran, who's the superintendent of the Princeton Public Schools. And Steve had very big shoes to fill at the beginning of the academic school year, and just, I think, impressed every single person in this community. I think there's a bunch of public school parents up here, and you've just done a tremendous job, and we're very happy to have you here tonight. Typically, we would have your predecessor in to talk about the budget, but since you now have your November elections, we don't have to do that, and it's actually nice. We can, I think, have a more holistic discussion about what's happening at the school district, especially as it impacts the municipalities. So welcome. We're happy to have you here tonight.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here, and I'll start by saying that one of the greatest and happiest surprises that I had as a new superintendent was to discover the number of community partners who really care deeply about the work that we're doing to educate and care for the children of this community, and the municipality has really been primary among them. So I'm grateful to be here tonight to have a discussion with you, and I really just want to touch on 3 points. One would be, as you indicated, Mayor Lempert, sort of points of partnership. The second would be the demographic study that we had commissioned, and it may have relevance for the planning that you're doing. And the third area is sort of a commercial message for the strategic planning process that the district hopes to undertake in the coming year. So with points of partnership, I really begin with a huge thank you. Although it's August and sunny outside, you may recall that I began on January 2nd, and on January 3rd, we were hit with the first of, I think, 11 major snowstorms. And so right away, my first thank you goes out to Chief Sutter, then Captain Sutter, and the Department of Public Works, who were available at every hour of the day to talk about road conditions, weather conditions, and were instrumental in clearing those roads, removing down trees, rerouting traffic, and we really could not have gotten through the winter without the help of our police department and Department of Public Works. The police were also in the schools talking to kids, to parents about online safety. Looking to the future, we have a wellness committee that is examining physical, social, emotional wellness for all of our students. We will be looking at issues, for example, of drug and alcohol use in the community, so we want to talk to parents about that, students about that, and certainly we'll be reaching out to the police to include them in the conversations that we have to learn more about the ways that we can support our kids. Recreation department. Ben has become a close friend. Fields are, as most people know, in scarce supply in Princeton, so we did a lot of sharing of athletic fields. Moving forward, Ben and I have talked about a shared philosophy of coaching with common expectations, common best practices, so that students in the rec program who then come to the district for coaching get a similar kind of experience. There are similar expectations, and parents understand those expectations of what it means to be coaching a student athlete, with the emphasis on the student. Biking and walking. Even before I became superintendent, I had the good pleasure of putting on a helmet and joining the mayor on her community bike ride. I hope we'll be doing that again this fall. But we also worked with the engineering department to put together a grant to put in some traffic signals to aid in the walking of our students to the middle school. Looking to the future, I would be open to the possibility of a re-examination of hazardous bus routes. I don't believe that's been looked at in the Princeton community for more than 2 decades. And we do have students, for example, in Karen Court, Lawrence Apartments, who are just feet within that 2-mile limit. So we're not busing those students. They are forced to walk a great distance. And of course, traffic patterns and construction over the past 2 decades have changed, has increased, and so it's not always as easy for those students to get to school and get home from school, particularly when it's dark. So if there's some work that we can do together to re-examine the bus routes and maybe deem some of them hazardous because of changing conditions, that would be very advantageous to some of our students. I mentioned sustainability because I know that this town, this council is deeply committed to it. So are we as a school district. If there are ways that we can partner, we're very open to that. So we're doing a lot with recycling. We have a new food service company that's very committed to farm to table kinds of experiences for our students. But I put solar on the list of thoughts to throw out there. If the town is interested in looking at solar, then there may be some economy of scale if we were to join you in that venture. We just are now putting new roofs on some of our schools, so we have the infrastructure to support the possibility of solar. So that's something that we could talk about in the future. There's a great deal that's happening in technology. Mr. Goodell spoke earlier about negotiating support of shared fiber through Comcast, and we're involved in that. We have upgraded our internet with redundancy for the school district, for the library, and for most of the municipal services. We have a shared phone system with the public library, and so that's something, again, on an economy of scale. If the municipality is interested in joining with us in a joint venture, that may be helpful for the town. We are still in the process of interviewing a network engineer that will help to support the municipality, the public library, and the district, so we're grateful for that kind of sharing of resources. One point that I really want to make tonight is this last one on your list, dealing with electronic access for all. I was grateful to have Ed here tonight to talk about the affordable housing. We have probably, I think, 102 students, Ed, who were in Princeton Community Village. There are 450 students in the Princeton Public Schools, 12% of our students who are on free and reduced lunch. I would estimate, and we're going to be getting more accurate data on this, but I would estimate probably half of them do not have electronic access to schools. So they don't have email, they don't have computers, and that limits the ability of the school district to communicate to those families. It reduces the ability of parents to check grades, for students to check homework, but we are also in a day and age when internet resources are becoming increasingly rich and vibrant and integrated into everything that we teach in the public schools. So for those students who do not have electronic access, they fall farther and farther behind. And we do have what I would call an opportunity gap within the Princeton Public Schools that divides largely along economic lines. We have students who come to us with tremendous resources, and we have those who come with far fewer, and yet they may have the same ability, certainly the same potential, and we are committed to preparing every child to make a difference in the world. So we are in the process now of brainstorming ways to increase that electronic access, and it's not easy. We thought it might be, but it has proved troublesome. So we're looking at, and expensive, we're looking at hotspots, perhaps 250 hotspots that we may have to lease from Comcast, then we have to help with the payment for the modems and the cost for that. We're exploring a number of different options for trying to create internet access and then provide the computers for students who may need that. So if there's ways that we can work with the municipality to provide that for the members of our community, we would be extraordinarily grateful. And I know that we've had the conversation with Princeton Community Housing about electronic access. They're very eager to work with us to support the families for whom they are responsible. So I just put that out there as a way that if any community can provide that kind of electronic access for all, I think it would be Princeton, and we'd be honored to be a part of that effort. You had mentioned 369 Witherspoon, and the board has not had a discussion about the use of that facility for affordable housing. Currently, the board is awaiting results of an asbestos abatement report on that facility, so that we have a sense of the scope and cost of what demolition would be, what that would involve for the district. Our ultimate hope, though, is really to work with the town to use the site of the old Valley Road School and perhaps some portion of the facade, which has historic and sentimental value, in a way that's meaningful for the community. So I hope that there is a way that we can creatively solve this issue and use that site or the facility for the greater good. So I am open, and I know the board would be, to having that conversation. Demographic study. The demographic study, I think, might have been part of your packets, either the PowerPoint or the full report. It's an 86-page report. Some of you may have been in attendance at the board meeting this summer when it was presented. We, as a school district, had commissioned the report because of, we wanted to get general trends, obviously, over the next 5 years with regard to the growth in the community, but obviously we're particularly focused on the new housing, Avalon Bay, Merrick-Stanworth, and the Lakeside graduate housing, as well as some housing development through the Institute of Advanced Study. So the report looked at a 5-year forecast, and the bottom line is that for the pre-K through grade 5 at the elementary level, the growth is relatively flat. They were actually projecting, and the demographer was projecting an increase of 21 students over the course of the next 5 years. So we were initially looking at and wondering whether there was going to be a need for redistricting, and at this point, based on the demographer's projections, we don't believe that that will be a need. The numbers at each of the elementary schools, while fluctuating and peaking at some points, are going to be below historical highs. At the middle school, there will be a peak of 723 in probably year 3 is what the demographer is projecting, but overall at the end of 5 years there will be a decrease at the middle school. And the real sticking point for us has been the high school, which is already at an historic high at 1471. It is projected to go as high as 1611 before falling again to 1543. So although I will say, as of last week's enrollment, we were at 1528, which was about 25 students fewer than the demographer had projected for the start of school. So I'll continue to monitor those numbers, and we are working hard to ensure that there is space for our students. So we've created some additional classrooms. We have brought someone in to do a capacity study. We'll be looking at space at JW since the enrollment will be dropping there a little bit. So perhaps we can find some room at the middle school for some of our high school classes. So we are looking to find creative solutions, but based on the demographer's report, we don't see a long-term solution necessary. And then the strategic planning. The board and I are eager to invite the community, parents, students, teachers, administrators, community members, members of council to join us in a strategic planning process. We'll get dates to you and share that at some point publicly, but the process is one that brings the community together to ask the question, what do we want for our kids? It's a process that sets the vision and mission for the district 5 years into the future. It generally looks at questions of student achievement, at facilities, at climate and culture, at communication, and then most critically, it gives legs to that vision. And there are action plans that are developed with very specific outcomes and reporting that's done each year to provide updates as to how we are doing in meeting the community's goal for our children. As I said at the outset, the Princeton Public Schools are committed to preparing every child to change the world, to make a difference in some way. And we are grateful for the help of the municipality, the support of the municipality in achieving that mission. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any comments? Yes, Mr. Lieberman.
Thank you. Question, you mentioned the electronic access for all the students, and I know you noted the 452 reduced lunch,
free
reduced lunch kids. I was wondering, have you ever thought, and I know Princeton's, not this town that needs, people perceive doesn't need income, but have you ever looked at the Bill and Melinda Gates Grant Fund? And the reason why I ask that is because they have recently given towns electronics especially for students that you mentioned. And I think you mentioned 102 were in the affordable housing program already, students.
And there's more than 102. There's 102 from the Princeton Community Village.
Princeton Community Village. So those numbers would be very interesting if we were to put together some type of grant and present that, because I think we may be surprised that what may come out of that. I'm just thinking outside the box, but that's just...
Absolutely, but I appreciate that kind of thinking.
I just want to thank you so much.
Ms. Howard?
Thank you. And actually, Lance, I'm glad you raised that because I was going to follow up. I know I'm certain you didn't mean this to be an exhaustive list. There's so many collaborations that you couldn't include all of them, but one that I would want to highlight and that I hope is in the forefront of your mind is the Send Hunger Packing. And you mentioned, so you mentioned that in the context of the tremendous need in our community, and not everyone is aware of how tremendous, that it's about 12% of the students qualifying for a free or reduced school lunch. And so something that the Human Services Commission here for the town is so proud of is the collaboration with the school district and local nonprofits to provide the weekend food to those children who are food insecure. So I hope you've been able to see that.
We're actually looking very carefully at that and trying to increase the number of families who apply for free and reduced lunch by making the application more accessible, easily online, by mailing it to certain families, by posting a link to it on the same site where they go to look at the menu for lunch, and by creating language that is less bureaucratic and more inviting for families. And we are excited about the opportunity to use food as a way to build relationships and to expand the understanding of culture that students have. And there are communities I know that are even looking at providing food in the summer for our food insecure families.
That's exactly right. The hope is that once this really takes hold, and as you said, we do have more work to do to get those who are eligible but unenrolled signed up, and we can do that by making it an easier process to apply. We can reduce the stigma, but that it's only pre-K through 5th grade now.
We're expanding to the middle school next year, so that has been the
and hopefully
work
maybe
and the
it can
vision.
grow with that cohort.
That is the plan.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're excited about that. Thank you for raising that issue.
Well, okay, you have to come to the mic, but also this is just a presentation, so we're not voting on anything, and we do have an agenda to get to. So if it's totally pressing, come to the mic and ask it quickly.
I'm sorry to interrupt. In the last several months, there are 4 Hispanic families that live in the building where I live, and they have been bringing to me food that is given to them. I don't know whether it's for the weekend or to supplement their food thing, but even I can't eat it. Their sodium content in the spaghetti dinner is 950 milligrams in a tiny container. Is that related to what you're distributing to the children, or would that be from some other group? So that was just my question. I've been trying to find out.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. All right.
Thank you once again.
Thanks so much.
Oh, can I?
Yeah, Mr. Lynn.
I'm sorry, Steve, I'm sorry. Sorry so much. You mentioned also the hazardous bus.
Yes.
You mentioned.
Yeah.
Can that come to the Traffic and Transportation Committee?
Well,
could that something that could come through them? Because that Karen Court is becoming more dangerous every day. The students coming from there to try to get to school, so.
You know, I think it probably could. They could probably be helpful, but so could the Bike and Ped Committee. But also what we're finding, at least on Traffic and Transportation, is that GPS has also changed a lot of traffic patterns in town, and that's probably worth considering too, that streets that used to not be considered thoroughfares are really getting quite a bit more traffic. It's not just increase in numbers, but GPS sending people down streets where they weren't sent before. So there are a lot of things to consider.
There are a lot
It
of
could be
factors.
helpful, though.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, and then the final presentation tonight is Barb Blumenthal. I think I saw you come in. Yeah, Barb is here from the Princeton Ridge Coalition, and this is the neighborhood group that's been instrumental in their work on fighting for a safer, less environmentally damaging plan for the pipeline that's being proposed in one of Princeton's most environmentally sensitive spots. So turn it over to you, Barb.
So I have a short PowerPoint, but I think I won't do that. if that's
Can you
all
just
right with
talk
you.
really
Okay.
close into mic?
So I
Yeah.
thought maybe we would just skip and not do a PowerPoint, and I'll just tell you a little bit about what the updates are, where we are right now, and then see if you have any questions. So I think everybody knows about the environmental issues on the ridge. That's not new. The only change is that we actually went out and documented. We hired somebody to do threatened and endangered species studies. So now there's recent documentation of barred owl, red-shouldered hawks, and other species of concern. But 2 threatened and endangered species were found during the study. So there's good data now at DEP that validates that these are what they call exceptional value wetlands. And in the DEP process, that will become a very important issue. So that's just an update on the environmental side. You may have heard about some of the safety issues. I don't think we've been in front of the council. Well, you did the resolution, so you have heard the safety issues. So where we are right now in the process is that FERC, the federal agency that approves pipelines, issued its environmental assessment on the 11th, about 10 days ago, and they had a finding of no significant impact. We have 30 days to comment, so we have until September 10th. We're hiring Princeton Hydro to help us do the comments on the environmental side, and the same outside safety engineer that helped do a report for us is also supplementing our work and helping us with the safety side. So we have work to do between now and September 10th. And after the 10th, there's no more information or issues that can be put on the record. That's the end of the process. Any future litigation or appeals with FERC, you cannot raise a new issue that isn't already on the that hasn't already been raised on the docket. So this work between now and September 10th is really important. So in one sense, you want to have an overall strategy. In the other sense, you get everything that might be relevant has to be submitted. So where this leaves us is there's the FERC process, which in some ways the environmental assessment is not surprising because they have never had an environmental assessment that we've ever heard of where they found significant impact. They just don't do it. So, and what's really disturbing is if you read, there could be a thoughtful discussion where they actually take a lot of our data and research and comments. And when we've had pretty well-respected experts weighing in, they don't even mention them. In the environmental assessment, they never mention Henry Horn, the professor who knows the Princeton Ridge better than anybody in the world and submitted an affidavit back last summer. Even the safety engineer who submitted very detailed findings about the high level of risk in their construction plan, there was no mention of of any of the specific issues he raised. So it's really quite distressing to read through the document and just see what FERC is accustomed to is communities having input, but not being able to engage in a meaningful, substantive discussion, which we think we've been doing, and they're kind of unprepared for that. So they just they give weight to whatever Williams says, and they don't give weight to what community organized groups like ours, supplemented by experts, they just don't, they don't even bother to debate it. They just ignore it. So it's really quite disturbing. So we have 2 good things that are happening. One is there is an answer to all of this that we like a lot, which is called horizontal directional drilling, where you tunnel underneath through that nice hard rock on the Princeton Ridge and put a pipeline there. So That is actually the preferred solution. Every company uses it. Williams is actually using it to cross in Montgomery through under Beansbrook, a rather long run. They're doing it there. Ours is longer. If they did the Princeton Ridge, it would technically set a world's record, but not by much. So we know that it's an option. We know it's expensive. At least, it costs more money. In the overall scheme of things, we've done the calculations that say it's, in the overall scheme of things, it is not expensive to get a solution that addresses both the safety issues and the environmental issues at the same time. So that's what we're hoping for. And we think our best, the most likely way that that would come about is probably not from FERC insisting that they made a mistake in their environmental assessment and they now want to look at alternatives, but at DEP. There's two very important federal permits. One is a 401 permit and the other is a 404 wetlands permit that DEP has to issue. And they, in this process, have to look at alternates. So that's part of DEP's job, is to really take a very close look at what the alternatives are, because this is the kind of area that should be protected. So that's part of the process. So that's where we're putting most of our effort, is working with DEP. On the FERC front, there was a court ruling back in June. The D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that FERC has been violating NEPA. So these, specifically, it was another New Jersey pipeline where the pattern of just favoring the industry had gotten so bad that the court actually ruled that they can't do that in that specific case. So we're kind of anxious to see what's going to happen with ours. It's the first environmental assessment that's come out since that court ruling, and we think it looks really bad. So we'll just see what the courts have to say, maybe later on. Do you have any questions?
Well, I'll start. First, I wanted to say thank you. I mean, your group has been absolutely amazing, and you glossed over some of the successes that you've had so far, which have been significant, and I know there's still a lot of work to be done, but thank you for all the accomplishments you've made on this so far. And I assume we should plan on putting something on the September 8th agenda for council so that we can submit either in conjunction with the Princeton Ridge Coalition or separately as mayor and council, something to FERC.
We're responding, yes.
Okay.
So, yes. We'll respond together. And we probably will also put on the agenda these two consultants. We've been paying for most of it up until now, and we need to get the work done, so we're going to start the process, but we will be coming to you and asking if you can help pay for a small portion of that as well.
Okay. And the timing with DEP and when they're going to be making their determination is more nebulous then in terms of the...
This is one of those issues that's a little hard to understand why it's happened, but Williams hasn't applied yet to DEP for either one of those two very big, very important permits. They haven't applied. One strategy is the minute that you apply for those, there's a lot of information that's revealed about the project. That information was not available to FERC in the environmental assessment. So the assessment actually is making judgments based on very little data. So once they file with DEP, there will be a lot of information there, but it will be past the time when FERC might have looked at that data. So they haven't applied yet.
And has there been a case where FERC has approved a project and the state environmental agency has been the one to block?
It's not unusual that it happens this way, and that FERC actually could go first and actually issue a certificate and approve the project subject to the permits, because the permits are actually required. These two permits are federal and they're required. And so then the Department of Environmental Protection in that state would be able to do their process and reach whatever decisions they think are appropriate. So has it ever happened that they've actually rerouted a project or something? They do get involved and in some cases make some major changes along the way. So DEP has the power to do that.
Okay, well, that's good news. Are there any other questions or comments, Ms. Cormiller?
So, in my understanding, your main goal is to get the the horizontal drilling, would that be your main goal?
That would be the best possible solution because it
Besides getting rid of the whole thing?
Yeah, well, there is a balance between the need for energy and need for gas and
So you're not, okay.
We have not, as a group, we have not opposed the pipeline. But there's a process in place, and you're supposed to look at when it goes through environmentally sensitive areas, you're supposed to say, well, what are the alternatives? So we think that could lead them to decide that horizontal directional drilling is a better option.
So do you have support of environmental groups on that?
Yeah, they definitely would be supportive of that, yeah. Yeah. The other thing I should say is that we have had amazing support from Mr. Kaiser over here and Deanna Stockton. They're part of the team, and they've put their boots on many times and gone out and walked along the pipeline, as has the mayor and some members of the council. So we know how important it is that we've been working together on this. It sends a very clear message to the company, and they worked with us very well up until January, and then they finished their plan, and so we've kind of been communicating through the docket, their plan, our rebuttal, their rebuttal, our rebuttal. So I think we'll be engaging with them again soon in person, and maybe we'll make more progress.
Are there any other questions or comments?
No, just thank you. Thank you so much. It's a labor of love, and you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up is having some consensus on a council liaison for the Traffic and Transportation Committee, which, as we've heard tonight with so many referrals to the poor Traffic and Transportation Committee, that this is one of our most important and active committees that eventually touches every neighborhood and every street in the municipality. And I want to thank Jenny Crumiller for saying that she'd be willing to step forward to fill the vacancy. And as long as if anybody wants to fight Jenny for it, now is your opportunity.
So moved.
Second it.
Well, I did ask that we change the meeting time, but then, other than that,
right, and I spoke to the chair earlier today, and he was amenable to that, and I leave that to you to work out. It's your first assignment on there, but thank you very much. So I hear a nomination moved by Mr. Liverman to have Jenny be the new liaison to TNT. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
And seconded by Ms. Howard. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, congratulations, Jenny, and thank you. And were you taking notes on all of the issues that have now been referred? Excellent.
No, because I hadn't started yet.
Okay. Well, I'm sure we can combine our collective notes and...
But can I say one thing?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I have a big mouth tonight. I think I want to thank Councilwoman Butler for her service on the Transportation Committee prior. And I think that she brought back a lot of good information for us also.
Thanks. I'm going to continue to serve and attend the staff meeting on the traffic and transportation issues. I think Jenny and I will both do that. And if they're willing to change the meeting, that's great. Meeting time on Monday.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. And I'll add my thanks to Joe for having served ably in that position. Next up are reports, and we'll start with Chief Sutter with the police report.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't really have any highlights to point out in this month's report, but I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have on it.
We can't hear you.
Sorry.
Can you spell your name for the record?
You think I've done this long enough now? I don't have any specific comments on the report, but if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you. Are there any questions for?
I
have a broader question, but it looks like Councilwoman Butler has a question, so let her start.
Yep. My question's not related directly to the report, but it is related to, can you review the process by which we got our K-9 unit?
Sure. We were approached by the state Department of Homeland Security early mid-year 2013, and based on several factors, they had approached us to offer us a grant. Those factors were the amount of times that we were using state and other local resources for call-outs, and the type of community that we were in, specifically noting that the grant is for large communities with large universities, like we have Princeton. And that was part of this grant process, was that based on the grant criteria, the fact that we are Princeton University is in our jurisdiction was a big factor they took in. They offered the grant. It was free of charge to the department, and it was a resource that we have used many times. And if you remember back last year, Palmer Square was actually shut down for several hours, and that was because of the ability to get those resources here in a timely manner, because they're coming from the state or another municipality. And now something like that, for instance, could be cleared up within a matter of minutes because we have that resource. So the process began that way. They led us through the grant process, and that's how it was obtained.
So my concern is, as we've watched the events unfold over the last couple weeks in Ferguson, is the amount of equipment that community had. And what I read in the newspaper accounts is that a lot of it appears to have ended up in that community in the same way we ended up with our K-9 unit, that it was, the government, federal, state and government, and Homeland Security determining that these communities need this. And I would hate to see a trend whereby, we're sure we need the K-9, that's fine, a good reason, university town, et cetera, but where we would have militarization of our police force and end up with an approach like that. And I know you've been very good with the Safe Neighborhoods Unit and community outreach, but, when they come, do we necessarily have to accept this every time they come knocking, and, with the offer of more and more of that type of equipment?
I share your concern, and obviously there's two concerns that your question actually raises, two sides of it. And the first one is the militarization of civilian police forces. So we do not possess, maintain any military-based platforms in any of our weapons, in any of our equipment. It's all civilian-based platforms that are used. We haven't obtained anything from the military. Our assessment of any incidents that we may have to respond to, we are adequately, right now as we stand, equipped to respond to anything like that. If we needed, there's another concern, though, that this raises. They're, horrible to think about, but in an emergency or a crisis where there's a critical incident, are we equipped to respond, and can we get the equipment that we need? My answer to you is yes. If there was something right now that was outside of our abilities or the way we're equipped, we could get the resources that we need. What I would say is the K-9 is just not, it's so different than what you've seen on TV. It's not a military type weapon. As a matter of fact, I was just commenting to somebody today, it's been such a community resource for us. It's actually facilitated so many children and so many people. National Night Out, a dozen people came up to me to talk about the dog as an animal lover, as intrigued by it and what it does and its capabilities. So that particular resource not only serves us in an emergency, which is really its main goal, but it's been so beneficial to our community policing philosophy that I would hesitate to, and not that you did, but I would hesitate to compare that to some of the military type vehicles that we're seeing. And of course, common sense dictates, and we would not go not go down
I'm
that
just
road.
curious about the process, because it did strike me as a process that was described in similar fashion. Like, I never heard that we wanted the K-9 unit, or that we had applied, or somebody thought it was a pressing need. And I was at Community Night Out. I saw the demonstration, and I saw people's interest in it, and that's great. But then I couldn't help but be struck by the same process by which they seem to end up with all that military equipment. So I guess I'm wondering what the process is, whereby, who reviews that to say, if they call up and say, gee, you might need we think you need a tank based on, how many people are running red lights. What is the process by what's the process by which we get to, besides that we say no?
I would go, obviously, in any type of thing like that, go to the appropriate authority and discuss that, and open up anything of large consequence of a military-type vehicle that we just don't have a need for here.
And the K-9 unit did go through public safety. I know.
That's right. We discussed it at the public safety.
Police Commissioner Howard had a comment, too.
Yeah, I think actually, I'm glad you raised that, Joe, because one thing that I liked about the K-9 officer is actually that it's a very low-tech way to respond, and it's become a tool that it seems to me to be the opposite of some of this militarization that is so frightening. But where I wanted to go was that obviously the events in Ferguson, Missouri have given us all an opportunity to reflect on our law enforcement priorities, and there's been a lot of concern locally about law enforcement priorities, and I think it's been a nice opportunity, though, for us to look, and I've gotten a lot of positive feedback, as I know you have, Chief Sutter, too, from members of the community watching with concern and grief, and some people with an outrage, but folks reflecting on that we seem to have the right priorities here. It's been an opportunity to think about that, and there was a terrific rally this weekend, I think, to get that message out. And so I want to thank the officers of the department who helped make that a successful rally, and I want to thank members of the community who put a lot of effort into channeling the community concern. And we had Daniel Harris, John Hallner, Linda Oppenheimer, Minnie Craig, Shirley Satterfield, Mickey Mendelson, and Wilma Solomon. It was really an incredible effort to organize that outlet, because there was such a sense in the community that we needed to be speaking out. But it's a reminder, I think, that we have, in many ways, a model police department that's committed to strong community relations through our Safe Neighborhoods Unit and through the overall ethos of the department, but that also recognizes that our community's diversity is our strength, and that respecting and building on that is really important. So I wanted you to sort of reflect on, perhaps you could talk about what the events in Ferguson have meant to you in the department as you look back, and then also could you comment on, do you think you have what you need? Do you need any tanks?
Not now.
Not now.
Yeah, I don't think so. Just to kind of say in general terms that whenever these types of incidents happen, in my career I've been through and experienced several, not here in Princeton, but nationally, and it always is a time for reflection and to look at our practices and to see what is going on in other parts of the country and other police departments, and to see how we can learn from that, lessons learned. And that will undoubtedly come out of this unfortunate experience. We will, I think police departments around the country, if not the world, would be naive to not take lessons from these types of incidents and at least look at our internal practices and see how we can do things better, or avoid the similar type of things that are happening there. I will say that in Ms. Butler's point of the equipment, it's another perfect example of what things to reflect on, to look at what we have, see if we have what we need, to see if we have too much, not enough, and I'll just reiterate again, I feel that we have the perfect balance to respond to an incident, a critical incident that would require us to respond in a certain way. We have the tactics and equipment to do that, and that equipment is not a military platform. It's widely considered, I don't want to say ordinary, but standard police department, civilian police department type of equipment. None of the type of the things that you're necessarily seeing in terms of the armored vehicles and things like that. Again, just to reiterate, if things got out of our abilities, we have plans in place to obtain what we need that we don't have. So I think we're in a good place. We'll continue to, we always do, we continue to evaluate, we'll continue to learn, and make adjustments when necessary.
Thank you. Ms. Crumler?
Yeah, thank you. And, you know, I do think we have a model department, and I know from my ride-along that, that we keep statistics about who we stop and the race, and we've talked about this before, and I think we should make those statistics public as part of our police report, partly because we are a model community, and it reinforces that we are a model community in that aspect, and it also may put some pressure on other police departments. You know, and I think maybe we should do that. The other thing that the ACLU person that we talked with mentioned was use of force statistics. And it's another way that I'm sure we're a model community, so why not make that part of our reports?
Again, I'm open to anything, and I support your comments 100% that we do track those statistics. We have early warning signs, systems in place, early warning systems that indicate if something was out of the norm or that were triggered automatically, and we look at them. We review these incidents, use of force incidents. Each and every incident gets a meaningful review that goes all the way up the chain of command to me, and they're reviewed and adjustments in policy are made. So every one of these incidents that we have are very tightly scrutinized, and we do collect ethnicity